In August 1814, British troops set fire to Washington, D.C., burning the Capitol and the White House. The United States survived the War of 1812, but the nation that emerged from the smoke was geographically vulnerable and structurally weak. A brief surge of post-war nationalism created what newspapers dubbed the era of good feelings. A single political party dominated Washington, temporarily masking the deep fractures threatening to pull the young republic apart. When James Monroe takes office as the fifth president in 1817, he inherits a fragile state. The borders were poorly defined. To the north, the British Empire maintained a heavily armed presence in Canada. To the south and west, the fading but still vast Spanish Empire controlled Florida and stretched all the way to the Pacific. Inside those ambiguous borders, a fierce dispute over the westward expansion of slavery was already beginning to divide the country along regional lines. Monroe's strategy to keep the United States intact relied on a specific geopolitical tool, drawing hard, uncompromising lines on the map. He set out to build a fortress, walling off the Republic physically, internally, and ideologically. First, his administration addressed the British. The Rush-Bagot Pact of 1817 demilitarized the Great Lakes, removing war fleets from the border. A year later, the Convention of 1818 drew a straight boundary along the 49th parallel, extending from the Great Lakes out to the Rocky Mountains. Next, they turned south. Through the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819 and the Transcontinental Treaty, the U.S. absorbed Florida and mapped a definitive, jagged border with Spanish territory that carved a path to the Pacific Ocean. Once diplomats locked these boundaries into place, the immediate military threat from European empires on the North American continent dropped off drastically. With the external perimeters secured, the pressures of the young republic turned inward. Settlers poured into the newly acquired territories, bringing the unresolved debate over slavery directly into the national spotlight. By 1819, an economic panic wiped out the post-war prosperity. At the exact same time, the Missouri Territory petitioned for statehood as a slave state, threatening the fragile balance of power in Congress and exposing the illusion of political unity. This is a historical map detailing the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Lawmakers admitted Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state to maintain congressional equilibrium. To prevent future stalemates, Congress drew an explicit geographic barrier across the Louisiana Purchase at the 36-degree 30-minute parallel. South of that line, slavery would be permitted. North of it, slavery was prohibited. This Missouri Compromise acted as a temporary geographic truce that delayed a national collapse. Instead of resolving the moral crisis of slavery, the government literally mapped it out. While Congress partitioned the interior, Monroe tracked a new crisis brewing across the Atlantic. European autocracies, organized as the Holy Alliance, were plotting to cross the ocean and forcefully recolonize the Latin American nations that had recently declared their independence from Spain. This letter is part of the urgent correspondence generated in late 1823. Monroe reached out to his predecessors, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, seeking advice on how to respond. Written on October 17, 1823, it outlines the designs of the Holy Alliance against South America and debates a proposal to partner with Great Britain to stop them. Monroe rejected the British partnership, choosing instead to issue a unilateral warning in his annual message to Congress. He declared the Americas permanently closed to future European colonization. Any interference in the Western Hemisphere would be viewed as a hostile act against the United States itself. This proclamation, later known as the Monroe Doctrine, shifted U.S. foreign policy from defensive survival to the bold assertion of an entire hemispheric sphere of influence. When Monroe left office in 1825, the fragile consensus he oversaw vanished immediately. The political system gave way to the volatile, populist factionalism of Jacksonian democracy. Monroe's internal boundary, the Missouri Compromise line, ultimately failed to contain the nation's divisions. Within 4 decades, the geographic truce collapsed entirely into the bloodshed of the American Civil War. Yet, while his domestic borders could not save the Union, his external borders endured. The ideological wall he erected in the Atlantic remained untouched, serving as the geopolitical foundation for the century that followed. In the early 1900s, the United States industrialized, and the Monroe Doctrine evolved into a tool for aggressive intervention in the Americas. In 1904, President Theodore Roosevelt attached his own corollary to the doctrine. Roosevelt argued that the United States had the right to act as an international police power in Latin America to maintain stability. He used this logic to justify acquiring the Panama Canal Zone and overseeing its construction. A decade later, Woodrow Wilson applied the exact same rationale to dominate Caribbean politics and secure American commercial interests. In 1915, following political turmoil in Port-au-Prince, Wilson sent U.S. Marines to occupy Haiti. American forces took control of Haitian finances and customs duties, physically enforcing Monroe's ideological boundary. The ultimate test of this power arrived in 1917. Abandoning over a century of strict isolationist tradition, the United States crossed its own Atlantic boundary to enter World War I, deploying 2 million troops to Europe. At home, the public celebrated the victories. The United States had secured its hemisphere and was now dictating terms on the European continent. James Monroe inherited a burned capital and a vulnerable outpost. While his internal boundaries failed to prevent a national fracture, the uncompromising external lines he drew on the map provided the blueprint for a global empire.